Hello everyone. Welcome to the session on the role of communication in contemporary organizations. I'm Prabhashini Vijayavantha, Senior Lecturer attached to the Department of Human Resource Management, Faculty of Commerce and Management Studies, University of Kelaniya. So, the topic of the today's session, as I mentioned to you, is the role of communication in contemporary organizations. So, in this lesson, we discuss about the role played by the function of communication in contemporary or modern day organizations. In learning about the role of communication in the modern day organizations, first we look at the organizations which were existing in the early days. And then we gradually look at the chronological evolution of organizations and how the role of communication has also changed chronologically. So this is the session outline or what will be covered during the today's lesson. First thing, we look at the factors increasing the complexity of a manager's job. So we all know that we look at the job of a manager. As you all studied the subject of principles of management in the first year, first semester, you all have studied who is a manager and what is the speciality of a manager's job. And I am sure the majority of you all in your batch are looking forward to becoming a manager of an organization in the future. So we all know that being a manager is a highly paid job. So the manager's job, irrespective of whether they are finance managers, HR managers, marketing managers, procurement managers, supply chain manager or whatever, a manager's job is a highly paid job. So we all know that managers work within an air-conditioned office room, wearing a formal dress. So in that case, why are the managers paid more? So the managers are paid more because they run the organizations by making the critical decisions. So in making the critical decisions, they need the information. So but we all know that we do not have all the information relevant for making decisions. So managers make decisions with the amount of available information, in which case it may not be all the required information. So then once they make decisions, there is a huge risk associated with those decisions. So in that case, the managers and the organizations should be able to bear that risk and the loss of wrong management decisions. So as I explained now, you all will understand that a manager's job is not as easy as we see it from the outside. So then that is why we say manager's job is a very tricky and a very complex job. So there are several factors in the business environment and the organizational environment which increase the complexity. Obviously, a manager's job is anyway complex and there are several other factors which increase the complexity of a manager's job. So in that case, we need to find out what are the factors which are increasing the complexity of a manager's job. So we will discuss about that first. And then we will look at one of the leading factors in the present day organizational context. That is information and communication technology. In short, we refer to this as ICT. So as we all know, with the COVID-19 outbreak, we could observe that information and communication technology plays a huge role around the world. So we will discuss about that role as well. And we will see and discuss how the advancements and new developments in information and communication technology have advanced or made it more complex and sophisticated the practice of or the functioning of business organizations. Then we will look at the key findings related to corporate communications or key information related to corporate communications. And finally, we will look at the chronological evolution of the managerial function over the history. So this is what we are going to discuss in this lecture today. So let's begin with discussing the factors increasing the complexity of a manager's job. So the first thing that we could observe is greater competitive pressures. So you could easily observe that there is greater or a huge amount of competitive pressures. That is basically pressure coming to a business from the competitors or competition in the market. So we all know that the present day business organizations operate in a rapidly changing, turbulent business environment where they face rigorous competition from competitors. These competitive pressures have increased with the globalization. You all will learn more about globalization in your third year when we study the subject International Management as an optional subject. Then you would realize and understand that the top of the road Kade is also feeling the competitive pressure coming from Walmart USA. So then the organizations have to face this pressure successfully. If the organizations cannot handle the greater competitive pressures coming from the competitors or the threats or the rivalry coming from the competitor organizations, then the market would become, then they would not be able to survive in the market. So for an organization to remain competitive and survive in the market, they should know what they should do. So in a company, they need lot of communication within the organization and to the market through advertising, marketing, promotions, campaigns, etc. to face the rigorous competitive pressures coming from the rival competitors in the market. And then the next factor which is increasing the complexity of a manager's job are the shorter product life cycles. So as students who have already studied marketing management or who are studying marketing management, you all may have studied about the new product development. And during that process, you all may also have studied about the product life cycle. So when normally or generally, a product will go through 4 stages in its life cycle. So it will be initially introduced or launched into the market, and then it will go through the growth stage, and then it will reach the maturity stage. And if the company does not do anything for the product during the maturity stage to relaunch the product, it will automatically decline. And then with that, the life cycle of that particular product will end. So therefore, the companies have to ensure that the products may have a very longer life cycle without reaching the declining stage. Because if a product reaches the declining stage, after that, that product goes out of the market. And then the company will not be able to sell that product in the market, and as a result the company will lose that product from their product portfolio. And also, as the company loses this product, the company will have to relaunch another product, which is a very costly and a very time consuming and a task which requires a huge effort. So therefore, always organizations prefer to have products with a longer life cycle, so that the product will remain in the market for a very long period of time. But though it is the preferred situation by the managers, unfortunately, it does not happen that way. Nowadays, we observe very shorter product life cycles. The product life cycles of the products in the market are very short. What do you mean by shorter product life cycles? That means once we introduce or launch a new product to the market, after a lot of research and new product development efforts, it would very quickly reach the growth stage and the maturity stage and arrive at the decline stage and go out of the market. Which means very soon the company has to again either relaunch this particular product or introduce a new product to the market after putting lot of effort, investments and money on the development of a new product. So therefore, managers find it very difficult and very challenging to develop new products in the market. So it is a huge challenge for the managers to have products with shorter life cycles. So therefore, managers need to be alert on the products and consecutively do research and development and experiments, etc., and introduce lot of new products to the market. And also they have to ensure that it grows in the market with a huge market share and reaches the maturity later. And once the product reaches the maturity stage, immediately the company has to decide whether they are going to allow it to decline in the future or whether they are going to relaunch it and maintain it in the market. So for these things, they need to engage in lot of communication again within the organization in the corporate boardroom as well as in the external market through marketing campaigns, product relaunching campaigns, etc. Thirdly, the third factor which is increasing the complexity of a manager's job is the increased demands for quality and service. So now we all know that once we introduce a product to the market, people look for quality very largely. Now we all know that there are always people in the market. The customers make a choice over quality and quantity. So there is always a debate over quality versus quantity. So some people prefer a huge quantity at a lower price. So they are quantity oriented people. They look for a huge amount of a product. And there is another group who are quality oriented people. They focus on the quality of a product. They focus on the quality of a product even at a higher price. So in this situation, the customers are willing to even pay a little more or a premium price to buy a product of a high quality. So earlier we thought this situation only remains in the upmarket or in the Western countries markets, which are developed countries. But we can see this trend nowadays even in the lower level markets, in the developing countries as well. So now everybody is concerned about the quality of both products and services. And as a result, the managers have to guide their employees to produce a very high quality product or provide a very high quality service to their customers. And with this increase in the focus for quality, concepts like quality management or total quality management has also increased their demand. So nowadays, apart from the increased demand coming from the market for quality products, they also expect a very good service. So they expect a very good service from the company, irrespective of whether it is a production organization or a service organization. So we all know that they demand for a high quality service in a service organization. You all have studied in detail about providing a high quality service in your subject marketing management under the topic service marketing. Apart from that, even when we are selling a product and also when we are providing after-sales services, it is expected that the companies provide a very high quality service. So there is a huge demand to be catered regarding the quality and service of products. And then more regulatory constraints. You may see nowadays the laws and the regulations, the rules and regulations are very tough. So we have to handle those regulatory constraints or restrictions very carefully. If the organizations do not adhere to or abide by the laws imposed by the government of a particular country, and also if they are operating internationally, the laws imposed by the host country and the international trade regulations imposed by the World Trade Organization, so then the organizations will get into very troublesome positions or very challenging positions. It is not like those days now. There are a lot of constraints or restrictions. So then the employees have to adhere to these regulatory constraints or restrictions. As if they don't adhere to those regulations or restrictions, we could observe that there are also mechanisms to raid these organizations to find out whether they are adhering to these regulations. In case if these employees are not adhering to the specified rules and regulations, then these organizations and the employees will be penalized. And then the next concern is about cost containment. Greater concerns for cost containment. So then there is a huge concern or a huge focus or a huge paying of attention for containing the cost. What do you mean by containment? Reducing or reduction. reduction of cost. So the companies are nowadays largely focusing on reducing the costs of products and services offered in the market. So then when the companies are able to reduce the cost of their products, manufacturing or providing services, they are able to provide them at a relatively cheaper or lower price even while keeping a profit margin. So then that would be a huge advantage for these organizations. But at the same time, they face a huge challenge here. Because while containing or reducing the cost, they have to also maintain or ensure quality as mentioned previously. So maintaining or ensuring the quality of the products and at the same time selling those products at a lower cost is a huge challenge for the organizations. And therefore, it is important that the managers can organize meetings and different methods of communication between themselves and their employees to ensure that there is a huge amount of new ideas or innovations pumping from the employees. Heightened awareness of environmental concerns. Heightened or increased awareness of environmental concerns. Nowadays, it is not like those days. It is not like the era of the Industrial Revolution. Now you could see there is a huge amount of heightened or increased awareness of environmental concerns. There is a huge increase of attention towards the environment. You all may have seen it quite largely. So a lot of people are nowadays, we could see, engaged in home gardening. Because we believe that the products sold in the supermarkets and the fairs, these vegetables and other fruits, etc., are very poisonous and cancerous due to the chemicals used in the production process. So therefore, people tend to refuse these products from the market. And as a response to them, nowadays we could see that organic products are available in the market. So this is a response to the heightened awareness of environmental concerns. And then renewed emphasis on human rights. So as Sri Lankans, I don't think I have to discuss much about human rights. Because with the United Nations organizations, Human Rights Commission being established, we observe that there is a very renewed or a very novel emphasis on ensuring the human rights of people in the countries and the world. But unfortunately, the same people who focus on ensuring the human rights of the people in the third world are depriving the human rights in their own countries. That is what you observe in countries like USA, France, etc. However, it's a good thing if all of us can emphasize or pay our attention on human rights. But that does not mean that people are allowed or given the freedom to do whatever they want. And also, finally, another factor increasing the manager's job, the complexity of the manager's job, is the diversity of the workforce. So if we look at the workforce or the Shrama Balakaya, we consider all the people above 18 years of age. So the able people who are willing and able to contribute to the economy are identified as the workforce. So now if you look at the workforce, we see a huge mobility among the workforce. So as the workforce is mobile, or as people can easily travel from one country to another, we would see a lot of people traveling and working in other countries. So as a result, we could see a lot of now foreigners like Chinese working in Sri Lanka. So now a construction site of Sri Lanka, which was traditionally full by the Sri Lankans, including Sinhalese, Tamils, Buddhists and Catholics, now has Chinese. So all these factors create a lot of complexity in the manager's job. Considering these factors which make the life of a contemporary manager very complex, it is obvious that facing all these challenges requires a special skill from the managers. These challenges which we discussed earlier and the diversity in the work environment, where we have people from multiple ethnicities, multiple religions, multiple parts of the country and the world, speaking different languages, largely demand or hugely demand the managers to master a special skill. So what is that special skill? It is effective managerial communication skills. So managers need very effective or very strong managerial communication skills. So they need the skills to communicate with different parties. And technology also helps with this communication challenge. Technology largely helps the managers to face this challenge in communication by enabling them to talk to people via faraway places, via sources like telephone calls, text messages, WhatsApp calls, Viber calls, Zoom meetings, etc. and write to them through emails, letters, memos, text messages, WhatsApp messages, Viber messages, etc. And also, given the diverse work environment, there is a huge need to become better cross-cultural communicators. So, given the situation in the work environment, where there is a hugely diverse workforce, there is a need for the managers to become better cross-cultural communicators, or people who can communicate within a cross-cultural background. So then we move on to discuss about the importance of communication in the modern day organizations. Why do we look here? Because we realized that there are several challenges that are affecting or making the manager's job complex. And then to face the challenges created by those factors, we understood that the managers need communication skills. So next, we are going to look at the importance of effective managerial communication skills for the managers. Key findings related to corporate communications. So this slide shows some findings, some key or very important findings derived by doing research studies about organizations. They indicate or explain the importance of corporate communications or successful corporate communications for organizations. So let's see what are the outcomes of successful corporate communications. Effective communication leads to. So effective communication leads to great financial performance, high employee engagement, and low employee turnover. So if you engage in effective communication, that means you are focusing on the ultimate outcome in the communication process, or you are attempting the communication process or focusing the communication process to achieve the predetermined objectives. So effective communication leads to great financial performance or better financial performance in the organization. So usually we evaluate the financial performance of organization at the end of the financial year by looking at the corporate financial accounts. So then it has been found out that the companies or organizations that communicate effectively have a 19.4% higher market premium or a higher market share than companies that do not. So that indicates the importance of effective communication for better financial performance, better profits, better dividends for the customer, the shareholders, and for better market shares and for higher share prices in the stock markets. Apart from that, if you look at the benefits of effective communication for organizational behavior and human resource management, we could observe that it would lead to high employee engagement. Effective communication leads to increased engagement among the employees to the job and the workplace. And then also you would see low employee turnover. What is turnover? Turnover means leaving. What is employee turnover? Employee turnover means the employees leaving the organization. This is so if more employees are leaving the organization, the employee turnover would be high for an organization. And if there is only a small number of employees leaving the organization, employee turnover would be low for employees in an organization. Low, there would be, so if the employee turnover is low, there would be a limited smaller number of employees leaving the organization. So it is very important to have a low employee turnover rate in an organization. So then effective communication leads to low employee turnover. So with that, we look at the importance of effective communication for the achievement of corporate outcomes, and then we move on to look at the historical overview of managerial communication. So here we look or discuss how the function of communication in organizations have evolved throughout the history. Historical overview of managerial communication. So this column titled Era shows how the historical evolution took place. And then the second column on characteristics shows the characteristics of each era or each period. And finally, the final column titled Communication shows how the managerial communication function evolved throughout the period. Stages through which managerial communication function has passed with the time. So then the first period is the ancient period or the medieval era, or in Sinhala we call it the Madhyatana Yuga. I'm sure you have studied about this medieval era for your history subject during grade 10 and 11. So what are the characteristics of this era? Initial efforts to organize commerce. So the function of commerce or trade evolved in the ancient and medieval period. So during that period, there was no proper organization within the commerce and trade. So the people were taking the initial or first attempts to organize commerce and trade. And the only form of communication during this period was written communication. Though there was verbal communication among people, this was not very effectively used. So the written records were maintained regarding business transactions between people. And then with the Industrial Revolution, which started in the 17th century, which started in the late 18th century, spread around the world throughout the 19th century, emerged the concept of scientific management or the era of scientific management. So I am not going to elaborate to you about the era of scientific management because you all have studied about scientific management for your Principles of Management subject in the first year, where you all have studied about the historical evolution of management. So during this scientific management era, what were the characteristics of them? So the management or managing business organizations happened in a very scientific manner. So during this period, there were very clearly defined job duties, time specifications for completing the task, adhere to rules. So there were very clearly defined or very clearly specified, clearly explained job duties for each employee in each organization. So for each job, the duties were very clearly defined and explained. And also, with regard to the jobs and the tasks associated with those jobs, they have identified the timing required for completing of a particular task. And they have mentioned the time specifications for completing that particular task. So for this, the Lillian and Gilbreth's time and motion studies made a huge contribution. And there was no much democracy for the workers. The workers were required to adhere to the rules and regulations of the organization. Looking at the form of communication, it was only one-way communication, that is from the top to bottom. So the communications or the messages or the instructions or the orders came from the top management to the lower level employees. There was huge reliance or heavy reliance or dependence on written job instructions and rules. So the instructions regarding performing the jobs and the completion timing, everything was very clearly written. And apart from that, the rules and regulations were also clearly written and specified. The only thing that the employees had to do is to adhere to the rules. So everything was very structured and methodical during this period. Next, as you all know, came the administrative management period. So then the emphasis was on authority and discipline. So the top management had a huge amount of authority, and also they were very disciplined. They wanted the employees to be disciplined. So the communication was almost the same as during the scientific management era. It was similar to scientific management, where only one-way communication took place. And then the next was the human relations era. And during this period, the relationships between managers and the workers are important. So during the human relations period, there were strong relations between the management and the employees. The managers also tried to develop a strong relationship or a rapport with the workers. And because of this relationship orientation, communication also focused on listening. Apart from maintaining written records, giving written job instructions, and imposing rules and regulations to ensure discipline, there was listening involved. So the top management largely listened to the communications or messages coming from the workers. So this was bottom-up communication. In the previous three eras, we only had top-to-bottom communication. And here we could see the managers listening to the employees in the same way as employees listen to the managers. So the managers were sending messages from the top to bottom, and in the same manner, the employees were also sending messages from bottom to top. So there was two-way communication. Then we look at the behavioral era. So the complexity of the organizational behavior and communication function was recognized during this period. So it was possible for the managers and the employees as well as the management scholars to understand the complexity associated with the organizational behavior or behavior of people in organizations, and also understand the complexity involved with communication in organizations. So then when it comes to communication, they realized that it is difficult to apply different theories in the process of communication, because this is not something theoretical but practical. Then came the era of empowerment. So you all know what is the meaning of the concept of empowerment. So empowerment means you delegate, the top managers or the managers delegate their authority along with responsibility to their subordinates. So basically they give their power to the subordinates. So then there is a distribution of power to everyone in the organization. So during the empowerment period, we could observe that people moved away from centralization focus to decentralization of organizations. And organizations changed from tall hierarchies to flat hierarchies. So we could observe a distribution of power and authority which initially was laid and centered among the top management of the organization among everyone in the organization. So once everyone was empowered, everybody had a very strong say in the organization. So there was a lot of two-way communication in practice during this period. So there was communication from the top to bottom. The messages came from the top management to the lower level management and in lower level employees. And in the same way, messages went from the lower level employees to the top management. And so all the employees at all levels were participating in some form of management in the organization. Then finally came the era of contingency. So during this period, we could observe there is a huge interdependence of jobs, organizations, and people. There is a huge interdependence of jobs, organizations, and people working in those organizations. So the jobs, the people in the finance department depends on the people in the HR department, and the jobs which were to be performed in the finance department required certain jobs in the accounts department to be performed. And also there was the interdependence among organizations like suppliers, customers, regulatory agencies, etc. So therefore the communication also had to be customized. The communication strategy that was adopted by each employee in each organization was depending on the situation. Communication strategy must be applied according to the situational requirements. So we call this the situational approach. So here now we are going to discuss about these eras of management in detail in an elaborated manner. So as I have explained to you the table in the previous slide and the table there, I am not going to again explain about each of these eras. But however, there are certain eras where there is a lot of important things to discuss regarding communication. So I am only explaining those eras with separate slides. Accordingly, I have created a separate slide to discuss about the communication function or how the communication function was practiced during the administrative management era. So, manager's authority was emphasized during the administrative management era. So during this era, the organizations emphasized the authority of the manager a lot, where they identified that the managers have the authority to give orders to their subordinate employees and also maintain discipline among the employees and within the organization. Similarly, like in the scientific management era, there was no listening and two-way communication. Even if there was listening or two-way communication from top to bottom and bottom to top, it was very, very limited. And also there was a huge importance given to the organizational hierarchy, and everything was organized in an hierarchical organizational manner. So always people had to follow the hierarchical structure. So as the hierarchical organizational structure was used, there was no use of groups in the organizations. So there was no use of groups or teams within organizations. And also there was no participative decision making. So I am sure you all have studied in detail about decision making in your management subject in the first year. So then in this decision making function, you may have studied how to do participative decision making, or how to get the participation and involvement of different people in decision making. So as a result, there was no participative decision making, and therefore there was no peer-to-peer or same level communication among the employees. So we all know that if you take an organizational structure, there are employees who are above a particular person, whom we identify as bosses or superiors or supervisors. And there are people below a particular position. We identify them as subordinates. And there are people who are in the same level. We identify them as peers. So there had been no proper peer-to-peer communication, or no proper communication between employees in the same level. So it is ineffective peer-to-peer communication. So then this situation was explained using a theory called the Gangplank theory. So in the initial administrative era, say this is an organizational hierarchy. So then this is the lowest layer and it goes to the top like this. So if there is a message that was required to be given from person B here to person J here in another department or division, there was no communication happening horizontally like this. As we mentioned, they always had to follow the hierarchy. So then B had to communicate it to C, and then to D, then to E, and then to F. And F had to pass it down again to G, H, I, J. Whereas it would have been very convenient to discuss between B and J. So this increased the workload among the employees and also created a lot of delays in the processes when we follow the hierarchy. So therefore, later on, the scholars introduced to managers that it is possible to do horizontal communication within the same layer. So this horizontal communication then later happened with the permission from the immediate supervisors. So then if B had to communicate with J, he or she could not do it directly still. He or she had to get the approval of C, who is the immediate supervisor of B. And then B would communicate it to J. And then J would take action based on the consent of I. So horizontal communication with the permission or approval from the immediate supervisors. So then this immediate supervisor will provide the authorization. And then the communication will happen using informal communication networks among the employees. Next, I would like to emphasize out of the management eras about the human relations approach. So you all know about the human relations approach, where Elton Mayo did the Hawthorne experiment and produced very important findings. So I am not, as I mentioned previously, I am not going to repeat any of the knowledge that you all already have from by studying the subject Principles of Management in the first year. I am only adding to that knowledge, and I am also emphasizing that I am focusing in this lesson about how the communication function evolved or took place during each of these eras. So one of the key people who was highlighted during the human relations approach was Dale Carnegie. Have you all heard of Dale Carnegie? If you all have heard, it's really great. In case if you all have not heard of Dale Carnegie, you all are kindly requested to search on the Google as to who is Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie was a very famous speaker, a public speaker. He has written a series of very useful books. And I also suggest, as you all are now in the second year, to study the books prescribed by books written by Dale Carnegie, such as the very famous world's best-selling book was How to Win Friends and Influence People, written by Dale Carnegie. So there, he emphasized that communication skills as a part of managerial effectiveness. So during this period, the scholars, the speakers and the managers jointly realized that communication skills are a very important skill for the managers as well as people in the society. And it is a very important skill that ensures that managers are performing effectively in their job. And also it was found out that gaining compliance from others depends on interpersonal dynamics of attraction and influence. So we all know that it's important to gain the compliance or agreement of others, other employees in an organization for someone's idea or decision. So this gaining of compliance from others depends on the interpersonal dynamics of people. So these interpersonal dynamics or dynamics related to people were related with attraction and influence. So people were trying to attract people towards them and thereafter influence their lives. Influencing others by listening, showing an interest in their concerns and gaining their confidence. So then these managers were trying to influence others. So this in an organization, it's important for a manager to influence others, both the subordinates, supervisors as well as peers. So this influencing of others, it was found that can be successfully done by listening to the others. So this listening skills was largely emphasized. The importance of listening was largely emphasized. And also it was mentioned that while listening to somebody, it's important to show an interest towards the other people's concerns so that you can gain their confidence. And also, apart from influencing others, gaining the commitment of the others was also happening through interpersonal communication skills. So when an organization wants its managers to be effective, and when organizations wants employees to be compliant, And when organizations wanted to influence others and get the commitment, everything was associated with communication. With attraction, listening, showing interest, gaining confidence, and interpersonal communication skills. Next, we move on to discuss about the behavioral approach. So, we all now realize by looking at the table which we discussed previously that with the evolution of the function of management throughout these eras, the managers, the organizations, and the scholarly community were gradually realizing the importance of communication for managerial effectiveness. So then, what we are going to focus now is about the behavioral approach. So in the behavioral approach, great attention was paid for communication within organizations. So then, the managers tended to develop guidelines on effective managerial communication within organizations. Apart from guidelines within organizations, there were reading material, textbooks, publications, research articles, internet articles, websites, blogs, etc., providing guidelines on effective managerial communication. Like you should answer a phone call within 3 rings, and how to write letters, and how to do public speaking, how to prepare presentations following the 6x6 rule, and how to maintain eye contact, how to listen to understand and not to respond. So those guidelines emerged in the world. So all these guidelines contributed largely to the developments in communication theory. And there were different theories and models related to communication that were emerging. So one such example for a theory that emerged lately is the speech act theory and the model of two-way communication. So I am not going to explain to you about the speech act theory or the model of two-way communication in detail because it is not very much relevant at this level. However, if you all are interested about this, you all are kindly requested to search the internet. Then there was one person who was highlighted called Carl Weick. Why was Carl Weick highlighted? Because he presented the theory of organizing. Apart from the speech act theory, there was another theory called the theory of organizing. It helped to understand the nature of organizations and also how communication operates within organizations. And also then later people realized the importance of rumors and informal communication. So during the behavioral approach, people realized that there are rumors taking place within organizations. And these rumors make a huge contribution towards the organizational procedures and practices. And also they realized the importance of informal communication in developing relationships among the managers in organizations. And also the managers realized during this period that there are different types of information required by managers, and the types of information required by managers change chronologically or with the evolution or passage of time. So types of information needed by managers has changed gradually. Next, we move on to the era of employee So, what about the era of employee empowerment? So, as I mentioned earlier, we all know what is employee empowerment. That means, in simple, the transfer of authority from the top managerial level employees to the lower level employees. So along with the delegation of authority, we also delegate the responsibility to some degree. But we all know that the ultimate accountability remains or lies with the top manager. So era of employee empowerment is after the year 1990. So during this period, employees had a lot of power and authority in the organization. It's not like the previous period where all the authority was centralized within the top management. So during this period, the managers were encouraging all their employees to participate fully in the organization. So managers obtained or encouraged the employees to participate in making the decisions in the organization. So for an example, there was a letter written by the famous CEO of the General Electric Company, Jack Welch, to its stockholders or shareholders in the 1990 annual report about the sharing of ideas to develop one vision for the huge corporation. And also with this era came the concept of open book management, which was practiced by Sam Walton at Walmart. So what is open book management? Open book management refers to a managerial concept where the management communicates each and everything about their decisions, profits, etc. to the employees without hiding anything from them, so that the employees automatically develop a strong relationship with the organization. And also they have a very strong trust with the organization. So that leads to increase their participation, commitment and engagement towards the organization. So as mentioned previously, this was a more participatory period, where the trade union members of organizations were also joined to make the managerial decisions through mechanisms like collective bargaining or joint consultative councils. So then the management and the employees always tried to arrive at a consensus rather than getting into conflicts or giving orders. So things were more consensus oriented or agreement oriented and relied or depended more on communication than on command. So we all observed that from this ancient period throughout the scientific management era and the administrative management era, there was a huge reliance or dependence on communication, dependence on commanding employees from the top rather than communication. But with the human relations school, the behavioral approach, and now the empowerment era, we see an increased reliance on communication than on command. Given this situation, the managers must delegate, facilitate, listen and trust. So given this situation, the managers must focus on delegating more authority to the employees and also facilitating or helping or supporting the employees to perform their duties, and also to listen to different things, and also trust So the managers focused on developing the trust with the employees. So managers started trusting employees and the employees started trusting the managers. So there was a huge trust between both parties. And also the managers tried to develop the listening skills to listen to the employees, and the employees also started listening to the managers. And here the listening was more focused at understanding rather than responding. Efforts to empower employees may also run into problems. So now we had been talking about empowerment in a positive manner. Having said that, it's important to highlight that efforts to empower employees may also run into problems, and the managements of organizations need to carefully handle those situations as well. And finally, we move on to the contingency approach. Or we call this, as you all know, the situational approach. The basic idea of this approach is that there is no one best way to do things. There is no one standard way to do things. Everything depends on the situation. So, the most appropriate communication strategy for a particular situation varies or depends from one situation to another. So, communication strategy appropriate to a particular situation may not be appropriate to another situation. A communication method highly effective at one time and place may be ineffective in another situation. So, a communication method which is highly effective or which is very effective at one particular time and at one particular situation and at one particular organization may be ineffective in another situation. So here, the scientific approach may be also more appropriate in one situation in the present day, while extensive efforts to empower employees may be better in another setting. So the final message is that the present day managers should know or realize how to apply the different approaches to different situations. Importance of matching different situations with varying communication strategies due to complexity of organizations. So it is important to match different situations faced within organizations with varying communication strategies due to the complexity of organizations, and so the managers should know to match the situation with the communication strategy which they would develop with their experience. So with that, we conclude our discussion about the historical overview of how managerial communication in organizations evolved up to this level. To summarize, good ideas can be drawn from the scientific, administrative, human relations, behavioral, and empowerment approaches to communication. So we all know that we have to practice communication today in our contemporary organizations. So for that purpose, we can obtain good ideas, or you can draw good ideas from the scientific approach to management, administrative approach to management, human relations approach to management, behavioral approach to management, as well as the empowerment approach to management. So the management should be skilled enough to realize and understand which approach is most suitable given the situation. Creative analysis is required to ensure that communication strategies adapt to the varying contingencies. So the managers need to develop creativity and they should be able to creatively analyze a particular situation to ensure that what is the most required communication strategy to be adapted to the varying contingencies of situations. So with that, I conclude the lesson on the role of communication in contemporary organizations. So if you have any questions, you can post them onto the LMS or you can directly email me. I'm sure you all have my email address prabhashini@kln.ac.lk. So then, thank you very much for your participation and downloading and listening this audio recording. Thank you.